I never believed houses could hold secrets until I started work on that foundation crack. I'm a practical person, 28 years old, worked in property management for 5 years in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Now I can't stop thinking about what was living beneath my basement floor. Before we get started, drop a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're tuning in from. We always love connecting with our community. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you stay updated on all our latest content. I bought the house in October 2019. It was a 1950s bungalow in a decent neighborhood. The inspection had noted some minor foundation cracks in the basement, normal settling for a house that age, the inspector said. The crack ran along the north wall, maybe an inch wide. He told me to keep an eye on it. My buddy Jake helped me move in. We joked about the basement having that classic old house smell. I had plans to finish it eventually, turn it into a game room. The first 3 weeks were normal. I settled in, got to know the neighbors. Mrs. Chen next door told me the previous owner, Dorothy, had lived there for 40 years before passing away. Late October, I noticed the crack had grown. I measured it against the inspection photos, definitely bigger, maybe 2 inches now. I told myself it was just temperature changes, the ground shifting as winter approached. But then I started hearing sounds. This low creaking, almost like groaning, that happened at random times. Sometimes at 2 a.m., sometimes during dinner. I'd go down to the basement with a flashlight, but it always stopped before I could find the source. By mid-November, the crack was 3 inches wide and I could feel freezing cold air pouring through it. I called a foundation specialist named Ron. He'd been doing foundation work for 30 years. He took one look at that crack and his face went pale. He started taking pictures, way more than seemed necessary. "Have you been hearing sounds?" he asked. "Movement underneath?" I told him about the groaning, how it had gotten louder and more frequent. He nodded slowly, then got down on his knees and pressed his ear against the basement floor. "I need to bring in ground-penetrating radar," he said. "I'll do it for free." That should have been my first clue. Something was seriously wrong. He came back that evening with equipment. After 30 minutes of scanning, he stopped and showed me the screen. There was a massive void beneath my foundation, extending 15 feet in every direction, 8 feet deep in places. But that wasn't what made him stop. The radar showed organic material in the void, and movement. "Movement," I repeated. "Like something down there is alive," he said. He said it was probably an animal that had burrowed under the foundation. But his voice didn't sound convinced. He recommended I stay somewhere else until they could excavate. The void was big enough that my foundation could collapse. I stayed at Jake's place. Around 3 a.m., Detective Marquez called. They'd started excavating and found something I needed to see. When I got there, police cars were everywhere. They dug a trench from outside, tunneling toward the foundation. I could see into the void now. It was like a small room carved out beneath my house. There were structures down there, deliberately built structures. Someone had excavated this space and shored it up with lumber and cinder blocks. They'd found a sleeping bag, food containers, water jugs, and tools. Based on the items, the space had been in use for possibly 50 years, things dating from the 1970s to this year. But here, what made them call the police? They'd found a door built into the foundation wall, leading into my basement. It had been covered over on my side, hidden behind drywall. From the void side, it was accessible. Someone had been able to come and go into my house whenever they wanted. The police searched my house top to bottom. They didn't find anyone, but when they removed the drywall covering the hidden door, they found fresh scratches on the back side. Words carved into the wood. SDAYED too long. Over 3 days, they excavated everything. They found journals down there, decades worth of entries by different people. The earliest from 1973, written by someone calling themselves the Keeper. The journals talked about protecting the foundation, maintaining the watch, describing a rotation system where different people would live in the void, convinced their presence underground was structurally necessary. The entries got increasingly paranoid over the years. The most recent entry was from October 28, 2019, 4 days after I'd moved in. Shaky handwriting. New owner doesn't understand, we'll have to teach them. The house needs us below. Without us, it falls. They never found who'd been down there. No fingerprints matched anyone in the system. Detective Marquez theorized it might have been Dorothy's relative, but no one claimed to know anything about the void. The city condemned my house. The foundation was too compromised. Insurance covered some of my loss, but I was out most of my down payment. The house was demolished. The lot is still vacant. What bothers me most are those words scratched into the door. STAYED too long. Like whoever was down there had broken some routine they'd maintained for decades, stayed longer because they were watching me, maybe waiting for the right moment to explain why they needed to be there. And those sounds I'd been hearing. Detective Marquez said they were probably the foundation shifting, but I remember what Ron found with his radar. Movement. Something alive. They excavated that entire void and never found any animals. Nothing that would explain those organic material readings. Trust your instincts. When you buy a house, really look at it. Check everything. And if you hear sounds you can't explain, if cracks grow faster than they should, don't rationalize it away. Sometimes problems with a house aren't about the house at all, they're about what's underneath it, or what's been living there long before you arrived. Looking back, I should have walked away from that attic project the moment I smelled it. But I was 31 and trying to save money on our first house in Portland, Oregon, and I thought it was just old insulation breaking down. My girlfriend Emma and I had bought this 1960s ranch in September 2021. Our first electric bill was $400. The inspector said the attic insulation was original and useless, replacing it would pay for itself in a year. I'm fairly handy, so I figured I'd do it myself. The attic access was a pull-down ladder in the hallway. First time up there was a Saturday morning. Emma was at work, she's a nurse, works weekends. The attic was dark, cramped, dusty. I started pulling out the old pink fiberglass insulation, bagging it up. About an hour in, I noticed a smell. Chemical, sharp, like ammonia mixed with something sweet and rotten. It made my eyes water. The insulation above the master bedroom was darker, stained brown and black. I figured water damage from a roof leak. Then I found the first package. An old beach towel wrapped around something, tucked between rafters. Inside was a mason jar filled with yellowish liquid. Chunks of tissue floated in it. There was masking tape on the jar. Sample 3, Sept 1987. I thought maybe the previous owner had been a biology teacher, but why hide it in the attic? I kept looking. Over 20 minutes I found 8 more jars, all hidden, all wrapped in towels or t-shirts, all with tissue samples in that liquid. The dates ranged from September 1987 to February 1989. The samples got progressively larger. The last jar didn't contain tissue, it contained something that looked like an organ, dark and preserved. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone, no signal up there. I started climbing down, and that's when I heard it. A soft sliding sound from the far corner, not quick like a mouse. Slow, deliberate, heavy. I froze on the ladder. The sound stopped, then started again, moving toward me, toward the access hatch. I dropped down fast, stood in the hallway staring up at that dark opening. Everything was silent, but I could feel something up there watching me. I called Emma, told her about the jars, the sounds. She said to get out, call the police. But I needed to know what was up there. I grabbed a heavy Maglite flashlight and climbed back up. The attic was silent. I crawled toward where I'd heard the sound. There was a clear path through the insulation now, like something had moved through it. The path led to a section above the garage. In the corner, I found a cardboard file box covered with insulation. Inside were medical notebooks filled with handwritten notes, diagrams, detailed procedures. and Polaroids showing dissections, extractions, experiments. The name on the notebooks was Dr. Leonard Voss. I got out and called the police. They arrived with detectives and the medical examiner. Our house became a crime scene. 3 days later, Detective Chen told us what they'd learned. Dr. Leonard Voss had lived in our house from 1985 to 1989. He'd been a general practitioner in North Portland. In 1989, he disappeared, never found. The tissue samples in the jars were human, from different people. The notebooks detailed unauthorized experiments, procedures done without consent. They were running DNA comparisons against missing persons from the late 80s. But then she told us something worse. They'd found a hollowed-out space in the attic insulation, just big enough for a person to hide in. And in that space, food wrappers from 2020 and 2021, a sleeping bag, water bottles. Someone had been living in our attic while we slept below. The access point was through a loose board in the garage roof. They found fresh ladder marks on the exterior wall from within the past week. They set up surveillance. The person never came back. After 2 weeks, the police left. We stayed in hotels, refusing to sleep there. Detective Chen called a month later. They'd identified 2 victims from the DNA, both women who'd gone missing in 1987 and 1988, both patients of Dr. Voss. She said they believed whoever was in our attic might have been connected to Voss's experiments. A survivor, a family member, maybe an accomplice, someone who knew about those notebooks and was coming back for them. Are they dangerous? I asked. Anyone who's been hiding in someone's attic while they sleep? Yes. We sold the house at a massive loss, never spent another night there. The new owners gutted the entire attic. But sometimes late at night in our new apartment, I hear sounds from the ceiling, soft sliding sounds. Emma says it's just the building settling, but I grab my flashlight and check anyway, every single time. Trust your instincts. When something smells wrong literally or figuratively, don't ignore it. Some renovation projects uncover things that should have stayed hidden. And sometimes the real danger isn't what you find, it's who else knows about it and has been protecting it. When you disturb their secret, you have no idea what they might do. It started as a simple floor refinishing project. Fall of 2022, Nashville, Tennessee. I was 29 and had just moved there for work. By the time it was over, the police had opened a cold case investigation, and I couldn't sleep without every light on. I'd found this rental through a coworker, a small bungalow in East Nashville, built in the 1940s. The landlord, Mr. Patterson in Florida, had inherited it from his uncle. He was renting it cheap because it needed work. If I refinished the hardwood floors and kept receipts, he'd knock $200 off my rent. My roommate Tyler and I started in September. The floors were worse than expected. I had to pry up damaged boards and replace them. That's when I noticed dark stains soaked into the subflooring. They looked almost black, spreading across multiple boards. Tyler saw one and said, "Dude, that looks like blood." I found more stained sections throughout the house. I photographed them and sent them to Mr. Patterson. He said his Uncle Marcus had lived there alone for 30 years before dying in 2021. He didn't know much before that. The weird part started with the heating vent. When I pried open the rusted grate in the living room, a smell came up from the crawlspace. Chemical, sharp, acidic. Wrong. Tyler said we should check it out. The crawlspace access was in the hall closet, a small hatch I'd never paid attention to. I opened it and the smell was overwhelming. Tyler gagged. I grabbed a flashlight and dust mask and squeezed through. The crawlspace was tight, only 3 feet of clearance. Dirt floor, old pier and beam construction. Then I saw them. Plastic storage bins, clear ones from Target. 7 of them stacked against the foundation wall under the living room. They looked new. I crawled closer. Through the clear plastic, I could see shapes in yellowish liquid, dark shapes, organic. One bin looked like it contained organs. Another had what looked like bones. "Tyler, call 911, I yelled back. "Right now." I didn't touch them. From where I was, I could see enough. I backed out fast. The police arrived in 8 minutes. They made us wait outside while they investigated. They started bringing the bins out an hour later, 11 total, sealed in evidence bags. Detective Ramirez talked to us 3 hours later. He asked detailed questions, took notes, said they'd need the house as a crime scene. The next day, he called me to the station. That's when he told me. The bins contained human remains from at least 6 different people. Organs, partial remains, all professionally preserved in formaldehyde. Based on decomposition, they'd been there 5 to 15 years. They'd also found surgical tools, plastic sheeting, clothing with blood, and notebooks. Medical notebooks detailing procedures, names, dates. The notebooks belonged to Marcus Patterson, Mr. Patterson's uncle. Detective Ramirez said 3 victims had been tentatively identified. People missing from Nashville between 2007 and 2014. Tyler and I got our stuff out with a police escort and found a new apartment. The lease was voided. Mr. Patterson claimed he had no idea that his uncle seemed normal. Maybe that was true. 2 months later, Ramirez called one last time. They'd found evidence someone else had been accessing the crawlspace after Marcus died. Fresh footprints that didn't match ours. Marks showing bins had been opened and resealed. A partial fingerprint that didn't match Marcus and wasn't in any database. "What does that mean?" I asked. Someone else knew what was down there. Someone with a key who came back to check on the remains. The house had sat empty 16 months between Marcus's death and when we moved in. "Are we in danger?" Ramirez was quiet. Someone protecting evidence like this has a vested interest. They might have been helping Marcus Patterson. They might have been learning from him. The house was demolished in March 2023. I drive past it sometimes. There are townhouses going up now. I wonder if anyone told the construction crews what was buried there. But mostly I think about those fresh footprints, those fingerprints that don't match anyone. Someone out there knew Marcus Patterson's secret. Someone helped him or learned from him. And that person is still out there, somewhere in Nashville, living a normal life. Maybe collecting their own samples. Always research where you're living. Check property records, talk to neighbors. And if something feels wrong, stains that look like blood, smells you can't explain, pay attention. Some houses hold secrets. Some renovation projects uncover things that should have stayed hidden. And sometimes the person who hid those things had help. Someone who taught them or learned from them. When you find their secrets, that person might be watching, waiting, planning to continue the work that started decades ago.